The week Christine Brown left Kody Brown was one of the most discussed moments in reality TV history. Millions of words were written about it. Millions of opinions were formed. Millions of people had something to say about Christine's courage, about Kody's reaction, about what it meant for the plural marriage, about what it said about love and loyalty, and the way a family can quietly collapse over years before it finally, publicly, falls apart. Journalists covered it, podcasters dissected it. Reddit threads ran hundreds of pages deep. And sitting in a house in Flagstaff, Arizona, in the middle of all of that cultural noise, was a 9-year-old girl named Truly Brown, watching her family end in real time. Nobody wrote a think piece about her week. Nobody stopped to ask what those specific days felt like for the youngest person inside that house. Until right now. If this kind of deep, honest storytelling about the people this show actually forgot is what you've been looking for, hit like, subscribe, and stay with me, because this one matters. Let's go back to before any of it happened. Let's reconstruct what Truly's world actually looked like, not from a distance, not from a fan's perspective, but from the inside out. Truly Brown was born in 2010. By the time Christine's departure became the storyline everyone was talking about, Truly was 9 years old and had lived her entire life inside a version of family that most children her age couldn't even conceptualize. She had grown up understanding, or at least accepting, that her father had multiple wives, that her household operated differently from the kids at school, that the cameras were a normal part of life, that family, in her world, was a complicated, layered, sometimes beautiful, sometimes deeply uncomfortable thing. She had grown up inside the logic of sister wives from her very first memory. She had no before to compare it to. This was just life. And within that life, Christine was everything. To understand what that announcement week actually meant for Truly, you have to understand what Christine represented in Truly's daily reality. She was not simply a mother in the technical sense. She was the architect of the day, the voice that was there when Truly woke up, the hands that made breakfast, the presence that showed up at school pickup, the laugh in the kitchen, the person who knew how Truly took her soup, what she was afraid of, what made her feel safe, what made her feel proud of herself. Christine was the constant. Every child's world is built around a constant. The one person who, no matter how much everything else shifts and changes, is reliably, predictably there. For Truly Brown, that person was Christine. Kody was the variable. Not because Kody was a monster, at least not in that specific early window of Truly's childhood, but because the structure of plural marriage made him, by definition, a divided presence. He rotated between homes. He had obligations to other wives, other children, other relationships. He was there, and then gone, and then back. And Truly would have understood that rhythm as normal because it was the only rhythm she had ever known. But she would also, in the way that children always do, whether they can articulate it or not, have understood the difference between the person who stayed and the person who came and went. Christine stayed. Christine was always there, and now suddenly Christine was in motion. And Truly was 9 years old, and she had no framework, no language, no prior experience to explain what happened when the constant moved. That is the emotional reality that was running underneath everything else during that week. Here's something that rarely gets acknowledged when we analyze these big dramatic moments on the show. When adults go through major life transitions, they have the cognitive and emotional vocabulary to name what they're experiencing. They can say, I am grieving, I am scared, I am angry, I am uncertain about the future. They have those words. Children, especially younger children, don't always have that vocabulary. What they have instead is behavior. They have disrupted sleep. They have difficulty concentrating at school. They have moments of inexplicable crying. They have withdrawal, or its opposite, hyperactivity. Clingy attention-seeking, a kind of desperate need to confirm that the remaining constants are still there. They don't say, I am terrified that stability is a myth. They show it in 100 small ways that adults around them, especially adults who are themselves in crisis, often don't have the bandwidth to catch. So picture Truly Brown during that week. Not the Truly Brown who appears on camera with a bright smile and a personality too big for any room to contain her. The Truly Brown who went to school that week, who sat at her desk, who talked to her friends about whatever 9-year-olds talk about, who came home and did homework, who had dinner, who performed every single beat of a normal childhood with a precision that should break your heart, because that performance required enormous, invisible effort. Nobody saw that effort. Nobody was supposed to. This is the part of the story that gets lost every single time we talk about this show. We watch adult dramas. We see the confessionals. We see the conversation in the living room. We see Christine being brave and Kody being reactive, and the other wives processing in real time. We see the things the cameras were pointed at. We don't see the 9-year-old doing the work of holding herself together in spaces where the cameras weren't rolling. And that quiet, private, entirely undocumented is the actual story. Now, let's talk about Christine, because this analysis would be incomplete and, frankly, dishonest if it didn't stop to give Christine Brown full credit for what she was managing during that same period. She was making one of the most significant decisions of her adult life. She was ending a 25-year relationship. She was navigating the logistics of a physical move, of financial restructuring, of legal complications, of the cameras capturing everything, of Kody's emotional response, of the other wives' reactions, Janelle's quiet solidarity, Mary's complicated positioning, Robin's visible distress. She was managing all of that. And simultaneously, she was Truly's mother, every single minute. While her own heart was in the process of completely reorganizing itself, she still had to be the constant, because Truly still needed the constant, because Truly had nobody else. Think about how hard that actually is. Think about the discipline it requires to set down your own grief, your own fear, your own relief, your own complicated joy at finally making the decision you knew was right, and look at your 9-year-old daughter and be fully present for whatever she needs in that moment. To answer the questions she has with the truth she can hold at her age, to protect her from the weight of the adult version of events while not lying to her about the basic facts of what was changing, to be gentle and honest and strong all at the same time, for someone who is watching you for every signal about whether the world is still safe. Christine Brown did that every day of that period, and the show gave her credit for her courage in leaving, as it should have. But it almost never gave her credit for the specific, extraordinary, exhausting work of being Truly's mother while all of it was happening. That credit is overdue. Now, here's the question that nobody has asked out loud in quite this way, and I need you to sit with it. At some point during those days not on camera, not in a confessional, not in a conversation with Kody or with the other wives, Christine sat down with her daughter and explained what was happening. She found words, she found the right tone, she chose what to say and what to protect Truly from, and what level of truth a 9-year-old could actually metabolize. She made 1,000 micro-decisions in that conversation, in real time, entirely alone, with no script and no producer in her ear. And one of the questions Truly almost certainly asked, in some version, in some form, was this: are we leaving Daddy? Or is Daddy leaving us? That question matters more than almost anything else in this entire analysis, because the answer to that question, the specific words Christine used, the framing she chose, the way she balanced honesty with protection, shapes how Truly understands love and agency and abandonment for the rest of her life. Children don't just hear the facts, they hear the emotional architecture underneath the facts. They hear, did someone choose to go? Or did someone choose not to stay? They hear, am I the kind of person things happen to? Or am I part of a family where the adults make thoughtful choices and those choices are explainable and survivable? I don't know what Christine said. No camera captured it. No transcript exists. But I know with complete certainty that it was the most important conversation in Truly Brown's life to that point. And Christine Brown, exhausted, grieving, brave, overwhelmed, Christine Brown was the only person there to have it. Here is what the public record shows about the weeks immediately following Christine's announcement. Kody Brown gave confessionals. Kody Brown had conversations with Janelle. Kody Brown spoke about his feelings, his sense of betrayal, his interpretation of what had happened and why. Kody Brown managed his narrative. All of that is documented. All of that is on screen. Here is what the public record does not clearly show. Kody Brown sitting with Truly. Kody Brown putting the cameras down and the adult feelings aside and being physically, emotionally present with his 9-year-old daughter during the specific week her world restructured around her. The footage of Kody in direct, sustained, emotionally attuned engagement with Truly during the immediate aftermath of Christine's announcement finds it. I have looked carefully at what aired. at what was discussed in post-show interviews, at what fans documented in real time. It does not appear to exist in any meaningful form, and that absence is not a small thing. It is not an editing artifact. It is not a production oversight. It is a pattern, and the next part of this video is going to show you exactly what that pattern reveals, where it came from, and why what happens in Truly's memory of that week is ultimately the one document in the entire SisterWives archive that Kody Brown has absolutely no ability to edit, control, or reframe. Stay with me. The second part is starting now. Let's talk about what TLC knew, what TLC chose, and what TLC owed to a 9-year-old girl who never signed a contract but lived her entire life inside one. TLC had cameras in that house. That is not speculation. That is the basic operational reality of how SisterWives has functioned for over a decade. The production crew was present. The equipment was running. The footage was being collected. And during the weeks surrounding Christine's announcement, during the most emotionally seismic period that the household had experienced in years, the cameras were rolling through all of it. They captured Christine's courage. They captured Kody's reaction. They captured the other wives processing the news in real time. They captured confessionals and conversations, and the specific, documentary texture of a plural marriage coming apart at one of its foundational seams. Here is the question that TLC has never been asked publicly in a direct, specific, uncomfortable way. Where is the footage of Kody Brown with Truly during that period? Not the footage of Kody talking about his feelings, not the footage of Kody in conversation with Robin, not the footage of Kody processing his version of events for the confessional camera with the particular brand of self-focused philosophical rambling that had become his signature mode of communication by that point in the series. The footage of Kody Brown sitting next to his 9-year-old daughter, looking at her, being with her, choosing her in that specific week over his own emotional narrative management. There are only two possible answers to where that footage is. The first answer is that the footage exists somewhere in TLC's archive, was captured by the production crew during that period, and was edited out before airing. Cut for time, cut for pacing, cut because the producers made a decision about what story they were telling that week, and Kody's direct parental engagement with Truly didn't fit the arc they were constructing. If that is the answer, then TLC made an editorial choice to remove the most humanizing evidence available about Kody's behavior as a father during his daughter's worst week, and that choice protected a version of events that the full footage might have complicated. The second answer is that the footage does not exist in any meaningful form because the sustained, emotionally present, child-focused engagement it would have documented never actually happened. That Kody Brown, during the week his 9-year-old daughter's family structure collapsed around her, was sufficiently absorbed in his own experience that the cameras, which were literally present in the house, never captured a real, sustained, emotionally attuned moment between him and Truly. Not because production missed it, but because there was nothing to miss. Both of those answers should disturb you. The first one indicates TLC. The second one indicates Kody. And here's the thing. Those two possibilities are not mutually exclusive. Both can be partially true simultaneously. And in either version, Truly Brown is the person left holding the weight of what didn't happen. Now I want to talk about the SisterWives audience for a moment, because the fans of the show have been underestimated for the entire run of the series. By the network, by the production team, and certainly by Kody Brown, who seemed to genuinely believe that his confessional framing could manage how the audience perceived him indefinitely. The audience was never that manageable, and what happened in real time during Season 16's airing is one of the most quietly remarkable examples of collective audience perception in reality television history. While the episodes were broadcasting before the divorce was finalized, before the post-show analysis industry fully spun up, before the complete picture had emerged, SisterWives fans on Reddit were already asking the specific question. Not in those exact words, but the question was there, running through thread after thread, comment after comment. Where is Kody with Truly in all of this? Why are we seeing his feelings about Christine leaving, but not seeing him be a father to the child most directly affected by Christine leaving? The absence was visible as the episodes aired. Fans were naming it in real time, accurately, with the kind of precision that comes from years of watching someone closely enough to know when something that should be present simply isn't. They were right about what the absence meant, about what it revealed, about what it predicted for the trajectory of Kody's relationship with Truly going forward. The audience looked at the shape of what was missing and correctly identified what should have been filling that space. That matters. That kind of collective perception is not nothing. It is evidence of a pattern that had been building across seasons, episode by episode, in ways the audience had cataloged without fully realizing they were doing it. By the time season 16 aired, they had enough data to recognize the absence immediately. They had been watching Kody Brown long enough to know what his prioritization of his own emotional experience over his children's actual needs looked like, and they saw it happening in real time to Truly. Let's talk about what Kody Brown's documented behavior during this period actually reveals about his understanding of fatherhood, not as a condemnation, but as an honest assessment of a pattern. Kody Brown has, across the run of Sister Wives, consistently demonstrated a particular relationship with difficulty. When situations become emotionally demanding, his first and most reliable move is inward. He processes out loud, in confessionals, in conversations with whichever wife is currently his primary emotional support system. He narrates his own experience with considerable detail and considerable feeling. He is not without emotion. He is, in fact, quite emotional, but his emotional energy in moments of crisis has tended to flow toward the articulation of his own internal experience, rather than outward toward the people in his orbit who might need him most. This is not an unusual human failing. Many people, under stress, retreat into self-focus as a survival mechanism. The problem for Kody Brown is not that he is human and imperfect. The problem is that he was the father of a 9-year-old child who needed him to override that tendency during a specific and critical window, and the available evidence suggests he did not do that. Or did not do it consistently enough, or visibly enough, or in ways that left any meaningful mark on the documented record of that period. And children are extraordinary perceivers of exactly this kind of thing. They may not have the vocabulary to name what they're noticing. They may not be able to articulate the difference between a parent who is physically present and a parent who is emotionally available, but they feel the difference with a precision that is almost cellular. They know when they are the priority and when they are the context. They know when someone is with them because being with them is the most important thing in that moment. And they know when someone is with them as a secondary activity running alongside the primary business of managing their own internal world. Truly Brown, at 9 years old, would have known the difference. Children always do. Now, here is where this analysis goes somewhere that most Sister Wives content never reaches. And I need you to stay with me through this part because it is the most important thing I am going to say in this entire video. There is a piece of footage from that week that will never air. It cannot air. No editor can cut it, no network can own it, no production decision can affect it in any way. It is completely outside TLC's control and always will be. That footage is Truly Brown's memory of that week, her actual, unfiltered, unedited experience of what happened in that house during the days surrounding Christine's announcement. What she saw, what she heard, what she felt. Who came and sat with her? Who didn't? What words were spoken to her and by whom? What the texture of those days felt like from inside her 9-year-old experience of them. That memory, private, permanent, entirely hers, is being stored right now in the mind of a girl who is growing up, who is developing the cognitive and emotional tools to increasingly understand what she lived through, and who will one day have the full adult vocabulary to name it precisely. Memory is not static. It reorganizes itself as we grow. New understanding gets layered over old experience. A child who lived through something at 9 may not fully understand what it meant until she is 19 or 25 or 30. The event is stored early. The meaning of the event becomes available later when the tools to interpret it are finally in place. Truly Brown is living through that process right now. Somewhere in the years between the child who sat in that Flagstaff house and the adult she is becoming, she is developing the framework to understand what that week was. Who showed up for her? Who didn't? What love looked like in practice during the worst week of her childhood, and what love looked like in its absence. And here is the thing about that private, unbroadcast, completely uneditable piece of footage. Kody Brown cannot manage it. He cannot give a confessional that reframes it. He cannot sit down with a camera crew and narrate a version of events that overwrites what Truly actually experienced. He cannot control the lighting, or the edit, or the musical underscore. Whatever he did or did not do during that week, whatever choice he made or failed to make about where his presence and attention belonged, Truly Brown is the sole owner of the complete record, and she will carry it with her into every future conversation, every future decision, every future moment of choosing how much space her father occupies in her adult life. That is the most powerful document in the entire Sister Wives archive, and it was never filmed, and it will never air, and it is completely, permanently beyond the reach of any network, any producer, any narrative management strategy that Kody Brown has ever deployed or will ever deploy. Think about what that means for the long arc of this story. We have watched, across multiple seasons and multiple painful episodes, the deterioration of Kody's relationships with his adult children. With Peyton, with McKelty, with Aspen, with the children who grew up and gained the adult vocabulary to name what they experienced, and began making choices accordingly. We have watched that pattern unfold in real time. We have seen what happens when children who were inside the Brown family dynamic develop the tools to assess it honestly. The trajectory is not encouraging for Kody. And truly, the youngest, the one who was 9 years old during the week this video is about, is still in the early stages of that process. She is growing up. She is gaining vocabulary. She is developing the cognitive architecture that will allow her to understand, with increasing clarity and specificity, what happened during her childhood, and what the adults around her chose during the moments that mattered most. And every year that passes, every new layer of understanding that develops, the memory of that week becomes more or less available to her in its full meaning. Christine Brown understood this. That is part of why the decision she made, as hard as it was, as costly as it was, as publicly complicated as it became, was ultimately an act of protection for Truly, as much as it was an act of liberation for herself. She was making a choice about what Truly's daily reality was going to look like. She was choosing to remove Truly from a household environment that was, by that point, increasingly characterized by tension, withdrawal, and the kind of slow emotional deterioration that children absorb, whether or not anyone intends for them to. She was choosing, even knowing what the choice would cost her publicly, to give her daughter a stable, present, consistent home, built around one constant that Truly could actually count on. That choice was not just brave. It was specifically, deliberately, consciously protective of Truly Brown's long-term well-being. And Christine made it while being fully aware that she would be doing the work of explaining it to her daughter, of carrying her daughter through the transition, of being the one consistent presence on the other side of the disruption she was causing. She was the author of the change, and simultaneously the person Truly needed to get through it. She held both of those things at the same time, and she carried them both with a grace that this show, and frankly this audience, has never fully credited her for. Here is where I want to land this. Truly Brown is not a storyline. She is not a supporting character in the Christine leaving narrative. She is not a symbol, or a metaphor, or a rhetorical device for making a point about Kody's failures as a father. She is a real person who lived through something genuinely hard, at an age when the tools to process it were only partially developed, in a household where the cameras were running and the adult drama was consuming most of the available attention, during a week that will live in her memory for the rest of her life. What she deserved during that week was simple. She deserved both of her parents. She deserved Christine. And Christine showed up. Completely, consistently, at extraordinary personal cost. And she deserved Kody. She deserved a father who looked at the moment his family was restructuring and understood, with clarity, that the most important thing he could do was not manage his own feelings on camera, but walk into a room where his 9-year-old daughter was sitting and be her father. Fully. Without the camera. Without the confessional frame, without the narrative management. Just her father. Whether that happened and the available evidence is not encouraging is something only Truly knows. And she will continue to know it, with increasing precision and understanding, for the rest of her life. The most important footage from Sister Wives was never filmed. It lives in Truly Brown, and Kody Brown has no director's cut. Now I need to hear from you. Where do you think Kody actually was during Truly's hardest week? Not where the cameras showed him, not where his confessional placed him. Where do you think he actually was, emotionally? And where do you think he should have been? Drop your answer in the comments right now. Be specific, be honest. This community does not need softened takes. It needs real ones. And the conversation in the comments of this channel consistently delivers exactly that. If this video gave you something, If it made you stop and think about someone in this story who doesn't get thought about enough, then hit like. Not as a favor to me, because the research that goes into finding the angle that everyone else missed, the care that goes into telling it in a way that respects the real people involved, the time that goes into building a narrative that is honest rather than just dramatic, that work is real, and the like button is how you tell the algorithm that it matters. So hit it! Share this video with someone who has only ever seen the Christine winning version of this story and has never stopped to ask what Truly's version of that same week looked like. Those two versions of the same event are not identical, and the gap between them is where the most important truth lives. Subscribe to SisterWives Crew, because Topic 19 is coming, and it is going to do something that no video on this channel has done yet. It is going to take you back to Season 1, all the way back. And it is going to show you something hidden in the very beginning of this series. Something that was there from the first episode, that nobody flagged at the time, that predicted the entire trajectory of everything that followed. Every topic we have covered, every pattern we have traced, every absence we have named. It was all seated in Season 1, in a moment so small and so easy to miss that it passed without comment for over a decade. Topic 19 is going to show you exactly what that moment was, and once you see it, you will not be able to unsee it. And you will understand, finally, why this show ended the only way it ever could. Subscribe, turn on notifications, because Topic 19 drops soon, and you do not want to come to that conversation late. Truly Brown deserved better. She still does, and the least we can do is make sure her story gets told with the honesty it was never given while the cameras were rolling.